just to make sure that you can get a little bit more time. I'm also cognizant, thanks for the stretching, it's been a long day, so cognizant of the fact that this is at the very end of the day. I am excited about sharing a bit of my previous academic research, be a little bit different than what we've been hearing today, and then followed by my actual work at SteelWave, what we're doing in terms of land use, entitlement, retrofitting existing assets, and also in new development. A lot of overlap with a lot of you guys. Obviously, we're in a building right now. Each of you and your companies occupy buildings. We have a company here, Mighty Buildings. We have people that build buildings. And so at every level of everyone in this room, you are either in a building, touching a building, you've been in one, or you have a certain standard of what a good building and a green building should be. And I think that is kind of where this will touch everybody, and I'll try to bring that home at the end. But bear with me if it gets a little real estate-y here. So in terms of the session, that this next 25 minutes, I'm going to be talking about kind of what drives green investment in actual commercial real estate. Funny enough, we build buildings for primarily life science and creative office. Gilead is one of our tenants, and we are building a project right now right next to your corporate campus in Foster City. And I think you guys are interested in it. But I'll also then talk about commitments. How are leaders, which a lot of people have touched on today, but how are we committed to actual programming and doing something about it? Also then following that with, how do we create value? What does that really look like? Is it an ROI? Is it financial? Is it otherwise? Is it doing right by doing good? What does that really look like? And then the tough question, how do we measure and track it and report it? Because a lot of the times when you think about buildings and building sustainability, there is a lack of consensus in the measurement, which makes it really tough. You've heard about LEED, you've heard about WELL, you hear about FitWell, you hear about, there are enough certifications or benchmarks, to count on more than, two hands. And that alone makes it very difficult when you talk about setting consistent standards. Now, there are consistent standards out there, but there is an opportunity for that to grow for sure. So we'll touch on that. Brief background on me. I have a business degree, mostly focused on finance. I also worked on technology, entrepreneurship, and innovation when I was at Berkeley. I got my master's at Oxford and studied sustainable urban development, which was specifically focused on green buildings and retrofitting existing assets. So that is kind of my background. Today I will be touching on, just in this initial part, about my thesis, which was focused on green building retrofits, primarily in California, because that's where I work, and it was very relevant to my academic and professional career, and looking at what are the main drivers for actually encouraging people to invest in these types of either building upgrades, net zero concrete or cement, 3D printing, building technology, like what is influencing, what is driving owners and capital partners to actually make those decisions to invest in these amazing technologies that we need to in order to make our building stock operate more efficiently and have less embedded carbon footprints. So that was what my thesis looked at. I basically did 16 structured interviews with CEOs and leaders of major commercial real estate companies, primarily focused around the Bay Area. So these were public and private firms. Thought it was important to get the public companies such as Gilead's and even Intel and HP and other. Those aren't companies I can't disclose who was in the study, but those types of companies, because in public firms, one of the findings you'll see is that disclosure and disclosure requirements, whether they're state mandated standards or they are requirements for public reporting because they have shareholders or stakeholders, that is one of the primary drivers of making a building green or making aspects of a building green, like HVAC, like I know you guys are working on. And what I found in these semi-structured interviews with a lot of data points, they were qualitative interviews in addition to quantitative data, is basically that in public firms, there was a positive correlation with having a green building and actually undergoing green building retrofits. I'll pause really quickly because I didn't describe what a green building retrofit is. It is basically in the name, but when you retrofit an existing building, you're taking something that is already there, the concrete, the steel, the rebar, the glass, as much of that as you possibly can, and you're either repurposing the building or you're taking some of those elements away when you destroy it, and then you're trying to reuse and repurpose those in that actual building. Could also look like implementing new HVAC systems, implementing new building management systems, implementing new roofs, new lighting, occupancy monitoring technology. So when we all leave the room, the lights go off. Same with HVAC, things like that. Those would all be qualified as, a green building retrofit. Anything that makes the building operate more efficiently from an embedded carbon footprint. So the actual materials of the building, how much carbon is in that, and then which you guys have heard about, and then also from an operational standpoint when you use the building. The second key theme that we found is obviously it's the ROI, and it's the financial aspect, but it's also a lot more than that. It's the fact that, and I've talked about this in a few roundtable sessions with a lot of you, it's that not only is there a reward if we do this potentially, or we make certain investments, but there's actually, the most important focus is that there's a risk, there's a capital risk, there's a building risk if we don't do these types of things. And those can be seen in the longer term. Unfortunately, a lot of owners are very focused on this like 5 to 10 year timeline because, well, frankly, people typically don't own buildings for the lifetime of the building. There's an economic use and a functional use that those are different. And so a lot of these owners were focused on that 5 to 10 year timeline, which in a lot of cases meant that they're focused on a financial benefit typically, which you would understand and think. The third thing is that the actual structure of the way that people own buildings influenced whether they were doing retrofits or not, and the extent to which they were retrofitting their buildings. So a company, I'm going to pick on Gilead just because I kind of know, and we're not competitors. We work with you guys. Gilead and even Intel makes these important claims that we're going to be, we're going to be in only all-electric buildings, or we're going to only occupy buildings that are LEED Silver certified or LEED Gold certified. And those are really important because what that does is it drives owners and developers and asset managers to make decisions that then will benefit the building and benefit our world. And so the ownership structure, so whether Gilead owns and develops their own campus or whether we build it and then they occupy it via lease or they buy it at the end, the way that ownership is structured was incredibly important to positive correlation with green building retrofits. And that is probably the most shocking or like the most differentiated finding. Everyone kind of thinks, okay, if you have to disclose building data, yeah, it's probably going to perform a little bit better. If you can make it pencil out and it makes financial sense, yeah, okay, that makes sense. The ownership structure was something that our steering group was really excited about because it was something that really hadn't been found before in terms of commercial buildings. Now, that was just a brief purview into my academic research. If you guys want, can share that with you guys. It's interesting, but that's essentially the high-level overview. I'm going to transition now to kind of the pragmatic, the professional, in my work with SteelWave. So SteelWave is a privately integrated real estate company. We're a developer, an owner, an asset manager. We've done a couple 100 million square feet of development. That's not including the existing buildings that we buy and adaptively reuse. We've done about $15 to $16 billion in just development and $6 or $7 billion in the last few years, with about 4 or 5 upcoming in the next 2 years. So even though those numbers sound big in real estate, it's actually kind of medium to maybe small sized. We are established, we've been doing it for 50 years, have gone from the office to the industrial to now mostly life science and biotech. But in that time, we've learned quite a few things. One of which is that sustainability is incredibly important for the built environment. And I'm pretty excited and proud to be one of the first people to really tackle that at the company. We've been doing LEED certified projects and WELL certified projects for quite some time, over 15 years in terms of LEED, which is just one of the many important building measures. But to say that we were reporting and tracking and measuring how our buildings were performing would be a gross overstatement. We've only started to do that in the last 2.5 years, and it's been really great to build a task force internally to generate our first annual report and to really begin to kind of cascade that sustainability and embed the sustainability throughout the org, which we've heard from 4 or 5 people that embedding that in everything, every step of the way is incredibly important as a leader. So that's what I do. I also do like raw land zoning and entitlements and land use, going through the California Environmental Quality Assessment, CEQA, and EIR processes for the company. But as a director of sustainability, I'm running our corporate governance. So that's the reporting, that's the annual tracking, that's managing our property managers to get them to get me the information that we need to then report out to our tenants and our capital partners. So a bit of a twofold approach in my role. I'm going to walk through just like a brief. I'll walk through just like the timeline of what we've been doing the last kind of 10 to 15 years and how that's changed, because I think it's important. I know it's important to you because you're kind of going through it right now, we talked about. But basically from that 2010 timeline is when we really like kick-started the move to build buildings with a little bit more thought leadership. And we were basically testing like, which upgrades, which HVAC, which solar, which wind, which this, that, and the other, building management system, which of those are going to be the most important thing to our tenants and to the market, because that's inevitably who's going to be using this building. So we were doing that, but we were not tracking any of that data, we were not collecting any of it, and we were not reporting any of it out. And so the last couple of years, what we've done is been working on communicating that strategy and creating that strategy. And so it's building out the internal teams to be able to understand what's important and what's not. And I actually deleted the next slide, which was going to be the path to how we did that. But I think you guys have heard enough about paths about how to build that. So if you want to know more, I can share. But that was one of the benefits of going at the end of the day is at lunch I was able to delete a couple of those. Oh no. Oh, there we go, sorry. And then what we did is we built out our first report, we established our communications, we built our strategy, and then now we're about actually going and doing it. You talked about it, do and then act, as the last phase. And so we have to now go and achieve those goals that we've set for ourselves. And we did divide up those goals into a lot of key focus areas, which I'll get into next, that I think are incredibly important. But a little bit of I guess it didn't delete. Never mind. Here, I'll just go quickly through this. But creating a sustainability strategy or an ESG strategy, it takes buy-in. That's one of the main things. Buy-in from C-suite and leadership and your capital partners. That's incredibly important and can't be understated. I think everyone here kind of knows that. It really takes an advocate to be able to institute change in an organization. So getting buy-in is key. Limitations, like understanding what you can actually achieve and what you can't. There's been so much great talk today about a variety of different industries and strategies and plans, and some may apply to you and some may not. And so understanding where that line is for each and every organization, each and every team is incredibly important, and just encourage you to kind of figure out where that line is and how you can toe that line. And understanding those limitations, that you can't do everything, but that incremental change is better than no change at all. Then in terms of the industry insights, what do people want? What do people need? When it's the end consumer wanting a durable outdoor research jacket, they may not be as concerned about PFAs, so maybe that shouldn't be a priority. But if it's a mandated standard, then it kind of has to be. In terms of buildings, everyone seems to want solar on buildings, and that's great. But is there something better? Is there wind technology? Is there photovoltaic glass technology? Are there other avenues? Can we use net zero cement in 3 or 4 years? Hopefully 3. That we can enact that make a big difference, maybe a bigger difference. And then the last thing is measurement. It's so important to track and measure that data. To be able to report it, you have to. And so, you basically have to create goals that you can then actually track and measure. SMART goals, I'm sure everyone's pretty familiar with SMART goals. Measurable, attainable, specific, and time sensitive. I can't remember what the R is, but realistic. There you go. Yeah. Thank you. But yeah, but that's the whole point, is that you create something that is actionable, that's realistic, that has a time sensitivity to it, and that's incredibly important. So basically, this is just a cool little graphic about our report that we created. It's a real report. You know, it's not all that long. I think concise is usually the right name of the game. And so, you know, we created one. We launched it this year as our first one. It took 2 years to get there. So for you, you know, you have buy-in, which is huge. But you know, keep pushing and working hard. And it does take time. You know, change inevitably takes time, especially when you're doing something different. I definitely work in an industry and with a company and teams that there is a lot of legacy mindset there. And so you do have to overcome some of that. I kind of, the report itself kind of breaks up into the 3 main categories, which are environmental, social, and governance. I think my CEO kind of had a field day when the ESG, like in the last couple of months, was like, you know, is ESG itself greenwashing? And he's like, why didn't we call it a sustainability report? And I was like, well, it's because you don't like the word sustainability. And that was a funny conversation, but I hope it's not recorded. But in terms of the actual report itself, we broke up each of our goals into E, into S, and into G. And I feel like everyone, especially in real estate at least, they know E. The S and the G, you know, was a big head scratch for our executive team and our investment committee. You know, it's like I joked with our focus group earlier, but I think, I won't say who, but someone in our organization was like, social? I'm a pretty social guy. I think we got that one covered. And I was like, oh my gosh, we got a long way to go. But I won't go into these too much in detail, but you can kind of read them up here. But the takeaway that I wanted to have with this slide is that you've got to break it up into manageable chunks and then understand that when I do X, I'm trying to target, I'm trying to benefit my tenants. Or when I, you know, implement beekeeping at my site, you know, it might not seem like a real estate development thing to do, but actually you're contributing to the natural vitality at your site. You know, you're contributing to the ecosystem that's there, in addition to any educational programs you can run. You know, maybe that's a community thing. Maybe that's opening up your site to the public to allow people to come in and use the space. You know, maybe it's for COVID testing or things like that. So the important thing is that you silo and break up, or at least for us it was, to break up those into key focus areas and then figure out which of the line items that we were trying to target with each of our goals. I put new in here because, as you'll see, I also have net zero cement in here, actually, because I looked up your talk before you gave it. But these aren't really necessarily new, but they're exciting. And they're things that you would actually think, oh, yeah, maybe those are already being done in a large scale. Well, I can tell you that they're really not. And if they are doing them at a large scale, they're really pushing the needle in terms of green building sustainability, which I think is phenomenal. In terms of energy production, you know, you guys know about probably solar, obviously. Wind turbines, commercial wind turbines is something we're trying to introduce at our life science projects, and it is so difficult because they are not yet, like, they're just not efficient enough, and it's so hard because I'm like, we gotta figure out a way to do this. We can't do these beautiful twisted Darius turbines that don't produce anything. We gotta put like an HVAC wind turbine unit up on the roof. And our MEP team is like, no. But I think it's a technology that is so close and it's on the cusp, and I think you will start to see commercial wind turbines on buildings very soon, and I'm very excited about that, and that's something that I'm really trying to push. On-site battery storage, both for solar and wind, is really important. You know, being able to reduce your sensitivity to the grid if the grid comes on or off, it's super important. In addition to NEM 3.0 just came out. If you're in California and you use utilities, and you probably know PG&E, and it's not always the most reliable. I hope they don't hear that on the talk. But if the power does go out, you have the ability to now reduce that. Or you can offset, instead of pulling grid from the most expensive hours, you can now store power, and then you can, in those most expensive times, use that. The PV glass is something that I think is really cool. There's this great company, View Glass, which was great. Now they're running into some balance sheet issues and some quality testing issues. But PV glass is very, very cool. Wrote a paper on this in my master's. And They have the ability to basically use chemical agents or to use glass technology to be able to capture the sun, and just like a solar panel, to be able to divert that energy and to be able to store that energy. It's again on the cusp. I don't think it's commercially viable on a large scale yet, but it will get there, and I think that's really exciting. Then you have occupancy monitoring technology, which I've already talked about. Huge upcoming thing that I think is extremely important to keep your eye on: water and wastewater. I know maybe this is just a California thing. Maybe Portland, you guys got a little bit more water than we do. But in terms of gray water and black water, if you guys don't know what gray water and black water is, that makes sense. But if you do, then good for you. But essentially, it's basically water reuse and wastewater reuse. And so gray water is a little bit murkier, or a little bit less murky than black water, as you can imagine. That is going to grow in such a manner. We're already trying to implement that in projects, but again, tenants don't necessarily feel that comfortable. People don't feel that comfortable. It's like, okay, wait, that's black water. Like, that feels like, I don't know if I'm there yet. I don't know if I'm ready to use that water. Definitely not ready to drink that water. But how can we be thoughtful about implementing gray water and black water systems? Because in the development side of things, we are building for in 10 years. It may take 2 or 3 years for us to build a major campus, and then it's got to last 20 to 30 years. And so even when day one, when it starts, we're talking about, if I was to say, we're going to try and start building today, it's going to take 2 or 3 years to probably finish that massive campus. And so you have to be able to look forward and build towards the future. And as an architect, I'm sorry, I'm singling people out in the audience, but as an architect, I mean, you probably have that same task, right? How do we create places and spaces that are built for the future, climate resiliency, but also people's demand and what they want? And I think gray water and black water is going to be something you're going to hear a lot more, you're going to see a lot more, and I think people will get a lot more comfortable with in the future. Mass timber, growing. You probably have heard more about that. That's a little bit more commonplace now. Again, not new, but mass timber is great. Then also, I talked a little bit about beehives, but I'm kind of big on the beehives right now, honestly. We're implementing them at all of our projects. I think in addition to the educational aspect of it, we have programming that allows people and our tenants to be able to come and watch the harvesting of the pollen, of the honey. In addition to that, you're also creating, it sounds counterintuitive, but you're creating a natural environment and a built environment. We're building buildings, but we're also trying to foster an ecosystem that isn't just cement and steel and glass. And I think that's really important. And I think you can create places instead of just creating spaces or actual buildings by doing things like that. And so I think there will be more opportunities for those types of on-site gardens and hydroponics and things like that that I think will be really taken off in the future and are now. So why does this all matter? I kind of hinted at it before. We're in a building now. Your company occupies a building. His company is named Buildings, Mighty Buildings. But it's really important because it's important to each of us. I know in this room especially, but I think people generally do care. They care about how much. I think people would rather be in a building that operates a little bit more efficiently than a building that doesn't. And I think that is really important. We've seen that across industries and across companies in the space. I think people can change just by saying they want something better. They can ask something better of the provider, and I think that in and of itself can be a small instigator of change. And so we're seeing a lot of tenants that will demand it. There's every public company basically is not going to be in a building that's not, in California at least, some sort of LEED or well certified. I mean, Title 24 compliancy is already so high anyways, which is a great thing. People want this, tenants demand it, and so we provide it, and we have to. And in addition, if we're going to hit climate targets, I mean, this is an absolute must. I deleted a slide on all the numbers, but the commercial real estate and residential real estate, I mean, it accounts for an unbelievable amount of carbon emissions. I can't remember the exact number, but it's in the 37% or 40% range. I mean, that is absolutely monumental, and so this is a problem worth solving for sure. The other thing is that sustainable green buildings, I think, will they already have, in a way, started to become table stakes because of that. You know, people are more comfortable demanding that because they think it's the right thing, and we know it's the right thing. And so I think, why is this important? It's because it's important to other people and it's important to us, and it's absolutely necessary. And so we need to be, as a builder, as a developer, as a thought leader, and as leaders in this room, we need to be continuing to push the needle. And something in our organization, you know, I didn't have a lot of buy-in. We kind of started this thing with the mindset of, hey, I think capital partners and tenants are going to absolutely require this going forward. There's my timer, see? I got you. You're getting a couple extra minutes. And so just leadership is incredibly important, and continuing to push the needle when we can, come up with new innovations, you know, push that 27 timeline to 2026, you know, it's incredibly important. And so that's one of the main things that I think is important. I appreciate you guys listening. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. I can send you our ESG report. I can send you my academic research, but that's all I have for you. Are there any questions? Great. It's the end of the day. Everyone's like, yeah, get me out of here.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many less questions at the end of the day. Yeah, having worked in tech